evening, friends. We will start this meeting in another few minutes. Stay tuned for this meeting and request your friends to join as quickly as possible. Mahesh and Atul, are you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, yes. Yes, Sudhir, we can hear you.
Yes, Sudhir, we can hear you.
Yes. Let us start with this meeting. Good evening, my dear friends. I hope you must be enjoying. Am I audible, Mahesh? Is that all right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes, Sudhir.
Yeah. So, my dear friends, I'm sure you must be enjoying this journey of online internship through InTech Olympiad. And last 2 weeks, most of the teams have worked very hard and come to certain expectations of the mentors. And we received good response and good feedback from the mentor. And that was the reason why we conducted the webinar a few days before. And we promised you that we will conduct another webinar and explain you the solution document once again. But while doing this, what had happened is we had gone through the schedule once again, and then we thought it better to propose this agenda or a schedule for you to continue. There are no major changes as such in the schedule, but we have listed in each week what you will be doing, and then Mahesh and Atul would explain you about what exactly is expected in a particular solution document, in a particular document which we are asking you to submit. And if at all you have any question, feel free to ask us the question. You can raise your hand and we will continue. Now, the objective of this entire session, as I told you, is richness of the solution depends on richness of the problem. Now, the problem statement is in front of you, which is a unique type of a problem statement which you are talking of, which we all are talking about. But what is important and what is our take on the last 2 weeks inputs, what we received from you is the scope of solution is to be defined by definite set of requirements, where we have to invest a lot of time in understanding how a project should move actually. Jumping on a solution may not be a right approach to solve the problem. Now, why are we saying this? This is a cumulative experience of all the mentors put together, those who are working in project. And all my mentors are at a senior position and handle many projects. And that's where, if you have a problem statement or a project in front of you and you jump on a solution, probably it would be a short-term solution not satisfying all the requirements which are being set forward. Then what happens? You go back to again problem statement and identify needs and again keep on doing that. This is not a right approach. And we want to give you a professional approach. And what is that professional approach all about? We are asking you, and why I am saying this word and very specifically this sentence, because from academics, whenever you are in academics, we need to understand two fundamental things. In academics, failure is allowed. In fact, we promote failure but we ensure that there is no repetition of failure. But when you go in industry, believe me, failures are not allowed. You have to do certain things right in the first place. There is no escape. And that's where we need to realize and we need to consider this problem statement as a professional assignment. And that's where this is the project schedule, which is proposed by all the mentors. We had a discussion amongst ourselves and we have categorized this in certain phases. And while categorizing it, you must have noticed that we are giving a lot of emphasis on design part of it. Because unless and until you have a robust design, and while designing the project, you have a scientific approach to deal with these requirements, then you will do wonders. In the latter phase, then you don't have to go back and change your requirements or talk to the customer once again. And that's where requirement specification and design iteration first, which we wish to receive from you, is within 2 weeks from tomorrow. So from 3rd June to 16 June, you will consider and you will work on requirements. I will appeal you once again. Please don't jump on the solution. Please do not start coding. Please do not start identifying the hardware and put that hardware in place. Don't do that. That is not the right approach. And that's where. In the second thing, for design iteration 2, we have given another 2 weeks. We have another design iteration number 3, for which we have given you another 2 weeks. Now, why do we want all those things? Because once you have that design ready, maybe mentor is, and of course, mentor would remain part of this, and he has endorsed certain things as far as your design is concerned. Then we will go for design document, which is related to solution. And then a robust solution will be presented in the last week, that is week starting from 22nd of July, and we'll continue that till 28th of July. Please do not forget, I am aware about the schedule a college will have. Unfortunately, at present, our schedule is, academic schedule for any college is not yet decided, but we are expecting that probably in 2nd or 3rd week of July, the authorities may ask us to start the institution. Till that time, we will remain online. We will be in touch with each other. So that's the project schedule which we are proposing. But we are also proposing, Mahesh and Atul would focus and will give you insight about what exactly is expected in each and every aspect of this requirement specification, design document, and the solution document. But we have taken a decision that every time, whenever you need our help, we will conduct online meetings for you. And that meeting would be like broadcasting of information to all the participants, those who are part of this particular InTech Olympiad online internship. Now I request Mahesh to take the charge and start discussing about requirement specification. Mahesh, please. Mahesh, can you see this? I'll stop sharing, Mahesh. Hello?
I guess Mahesh possibly somehow seems to have dropped off for some reason.
Oh, he has a problem?
Yeah, either it seems, because I don't see him. Yeah, I think he's there.
Yeah, once.
But you need to possibly ask him to unmute. I will check.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me check. Let me check.
Yeah.
Okay. Mahesh is there, but I think, okay, I'll ask him to unmute.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Sudhir.
Yes. Okay.
So, you also need to give me sharing permission.
Yeah, I'll do that. 1 second. Just give me a second. Because, okay, so now just check if you can share the screen.
it says host disabled participant sharing screen. So you may have to make me a host.
Please check now.
Yes, I can see it now.
Yeah, okay, please go ahead.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, perfectly all right. And your voice is also audible.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sudhir, for this context. So as we discussed in the previous webinar, in the induction meeting, that we would be going step by step with all the students. Mentor would be someone chatting. 1 second. Yes, so we'll take the questions at the end of the presentation. So please, be patient for a few more minutes, and then we'll start taking questions after the presentation.
Yeah.
So with this, as Sudhir mentioned, that requirements specification is an important phase of any R&D or otherwise project otherwise, right? So we need to focus on requirement specification. So what we are doing in this webinar is that we are guiding you through how to go about defining requirements and come up with a requirement specification equivalent of document. This is for both types of projects. One is IT, typical IT software kind of projects, and other is non-IT or IT plus non-IT, which is brick and mortar type of projects, right? So Atul Dikshit, our another industrial mentor, would present about non-IT projects, and I would focus on IT projects, software projects, software heavy projects. So here is the the approach. Typically what we do in IT projects is we gather the requirements, and then while gathering the requirements, we focus on user types. Any system has more than or at least one type of user or more than one types of users. So what we do is first identify what kind of users are going to use the system, and then for every user we define a lot of what if conditions, right? What if user takes X action, how should system respond? What if user takes Y action, how should the system respond? So those and what all things user should be able to do is that we define is that what we define in the user requirement specification document. There is no specific format to it. It could be a pictorial capturing of the information. It could be graphs, or it could be a plain text or list format, plain list or tabular format. So the examples we have given here is a tabular format. So that way you can append more columns to the same requirements and add more things such as status of the requirement and so on and so forth. But for now, let's see the simple example. Other than the human users, system components, some of the system components are also considered intrinsic users. So for example, trigger events or certain batch processes, which are part of the system, but then they kind of interact with the system on their own. They trigger some of the events on their own, and system has to respond to those events. Other than that, there are third-party systems such as payment gateways or any other government APIs, Google Maps kind of functionalities. Those are also intrinsic user types basically. Other than these functional requirements, so what we define here typically is functional requirements. Other than functional requirements, there are non-functional requirements also for typical IT system. For example, security requirements, performance requirements, compatibility, maintainability, user experience, installation, uninstallation, upgrade, support SLAs. There are lots of requirements other than functional requirements, so we need to define those requirements also. So now let's see some of the examples of this requirement gathering. Here is the sample problem that I have created, which is in e-commerce, fictitious e-commerce application, which sells electronic goods online, right? Now, typically, what kind of users, types of users one can imagine? Like there are end users, which are buyers, there are suppliers, there are management users, right? Management users are different than administrators. Administrators are only basically infrastructure management people, while management users are business users. They are super users of the system, and they are different than administrators. Typically, people make mistakes here where they combine these two users. However, these are different types of users. Management users have access to certain confidential reports in terms of finance and so on and so forth, while basically system administrators may not have that actually. So we have to have different users. Other than that, there are batch processes. I have just taken example of two batch processes. One is nightly batch process, which churns out certain reports for the management users. And basically there's another batch process which runs for every 5 minutes and sends certain kind of email messages, SMS notifications, and so on and so forth to the users, right? So these are types of users. Anybody trying to play with the screen, please do not do so because it creates certain disturbance on the screen. Here is, different, how can we imagine requirements for different types of users? So one is, typical end user. So what kind of requirements do we imagine here? So for example, user is able to purchase one or more items. The user is able to purchase items using credit card. User is able to purchase items using debit card. User is able to purchase items using UPI, payment gateway. If the user does not log in, user cannot see previous order details. If a user forgets password, there is a way in which in the system to help the user reset the password, right? So some examples that I have said, this is how when you are designing a system, first you need to understand what use cases your system is catering to and look at the numbering that I have given. If there are sub requirements that you can define for a given requirement, then you have to do the numbering accordingly. So we can say that when 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 is done, then requirement number 1 is over. So this is how basically you kind of categorize the requirements also further. Another example is supplier. So supplier gets notification from the system when the item quantity is less than the threshold. Supplier is able to update the new quantity in the system. Supplier is able to add new product details in the system. Supplier can remove products from the system. Again, some sample examples. However, one can kind of go on and on till we are find that these many requirements our system needs to fulfill. You have to think. This is the phase where you have to think, meticulously. You have to think, at length, and basically, we have to make sure that all our requirements are captured, because then our system design is going to, cater to the design is going to be done in a way where it can cater to all the requirements. So hence we have to be very, very careful, because the moment we add requirement after doing design, a new requirement which it comes, and if that design is not adequate to fulfill that requirement, then we have a problem, right? So we have to be very, very careful. And more than functional requirements, non-functional requirement, we have to be very, very careful, because there the system design and those requirements go very tightly hand in hand. So you'll come to know when we talk about that. Another user type is administrator. Administrator is able to take database backup. Administrator is able to add new management user. Administrator is able to reset password for the management user. Administrator is able to disable the management user account. So administrator users are only limited to give the high level access to management users. Basically, they are typically super users, while management users are the super users. So management user can view dashboards with different activities. Okay, sorry, I thought there was some question. So management user can view the dashboards. Management user can create supplier accounts. Management user can add user accounts to the supplier accounts. Management user can disable supplier accounts. So you see how management user has a control. So my design is going to change the way. I'm not going to give access to administrator user to control everything. I'm just giving access to management user. So this is called authorization. Basically, I'm going to authorize management users to do certain things with supplier accounts, while I'm going to give similar access to administrator for the end user account. So all the end user accounts will be controlled by administrator, and all the supplier accounts will be controlled by management user. So this is how basically the design is going to be influenced by the requirements. Batch process. This is another system component, which is a pseudo user in the system, intrinsic user in the system, where the requirements are: batch process takes automatic database backup, batch process prepares daily sales activity report and emails it to management user, batch process sends email SMS notification to end users with the new status. So there are some of the responsibilities or use cases, as we call them. Each line is a use case in this requirement. We basically define such use cases for every user we can imagine. Now is another important part, and this is typically neglected while defining the IT system, and it comes as a follow-up kind of a, I would say, follow-up activity, basically from the system designers, and then they have a problem, right? For example, one has to understand different aspects of a system other than functionality. Is that it's not only academic project, it's going to be used in the industry at very high level. For example, at the performance levels, at basically large number of users going to use this particular system. So you have to be very careful about how do we make sure that the system is able to support incremental load. So we have to be very careful about performance angle, security angle, compatibility angle, installation, uninstallation, upgrade, user experience, and so on and so forth, right? So you have to think through properly before we put the solution or design in place, right? We go for next iterations of the design or low level design, as some of the people refer to it. So we have to be very careful about what are we dealing with, right? For example, performance, what am I dealing with? What are going to be my requirement when I go in production, right? It should be able to support load of 1,000 simultaneous users. So 1,000 users at the same time are accessing the system. And this is a huge load, right? So you have to make sure that system is designed in a way there are multiple layers, front end layer, back end layer, middle layer, which can absorb this load actually, keep some buffer and then pass on all this information to the next layer in the system, right? Otherwise, then system can crash easily actually. So that influences design a lot. Response time. What is the response time? If imagine you go to Google and you don't get your response in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, you will be impatient, right? You would want to move on to the other website, and hence basically you need to be careful. Then security requirements, it should be able to communicate, it should use all the communication with HTTPS, TLS or SSL protocol, right? Because it's very, very important that our system should be secure if you're doing financial transactions, right? Typically happens in e-commerce system. We should make sure that no one should be able to hack our system. So that's important. All users other than the end users must be signed into the system to transact with the system. So define all the requirements, right? So that way you're not missing on anything. And then these requirements are also useful when we validate the system. Now, there is a phase called system validation. QA is a part of QA. When we validate the system, that system is doing what it is supposed to do. We validate and verify all these requirements. Basically, compatibility, all users should be able to interact with the system using laptops or with Chrome, Safari, Edge browser. Let's say recent 3 versions, similarly recent 3 versions of Android and iOS phones. Android operating system phones and recent 3 versions of iOS operating system phones, and 3 versions of iPad, maybe non-mobile devices, which are tablets basically. So again, you have to be very, very clear about it. I have just left it here because it's a sample requirement. You need to go to the details of what resolution you want to support, right? You have to make sure that you mention that resolution, because different screens have different resolutions, and you have to be very, very careful when you, especially when you're designing systems for different gadgets such as television sets and set-top boxes and whatnot. Actually, you have to be very, very careful. So that's important. Installation, uninstallation. User should be able to install the application in less than 1 minute. That's an example. Upgrade, automatic upgrade should take place with the user consent. User experience, user should be able to create profile in less than 3 minutes. So all such requirements you have to think through properly, and you have to kind of define those requirements. So that's what you're going to do in the first phase, right? When that's Sudhir explained it in the schedule. Basically, there are first 2 weeks, which in the week which will start tomorrow, that is Wednesday, and that week will end on Tuesday, where all you need to do is make sure that you've kind of just keep aside the solution design document that you've already created so far. Focus on another document. Don't worry about the format. You can come up with any format. All we want, it could be a table, it could be a bulleted list, it could be a numbered list, anything that you want. Basically, make sure use that format, create a shared document, and all the team members either distribute the areas, functional, non-functional, user types wise, and then come up with the requirements and put together like a elaborate document of all the requirements that you can think through. So that will become a scope of your solution, because once the scope is frozen, then we can come up with an accurate design that can cater to all the requirements. When you do the design, you have to verify first that each and every requirement is being addressed by the design in hand, right? Actually, and that is very, very important. That is how you kind of make sure that you are progressing in the right direction. If you kind of go for a designing directly, without making sure that you have captured all the requirements, you know what is the scope of requirement. For example, if I want to, there was a time when Zomato used to only address, provide the information about different restaurants, their quality and review ratings and things like that. However, it never sold items there or never, picked up orders there basically, right? So in their solution, they clearly made sure that online order is not part of their solution basically, right? So that's how they designed their system. There was no payment gateway integration. There were no screens to accept the orders. After a certain period in time, they kind of integrated that requirement, and then they changed the design so that people could place the orders basically. While Swiggy from the beginning made sure that people can not only look at the menus, but they can also order the item. So their design right from the beginning was like that actually. There was order placement, there was billing, there was shipping, and there is a track of delivery person, and there is a map and everything. So that is how, when you design the systems, you have to consider the design which will cater to all the requirements. So after working on this phase, then there is a phase called design iteration phase. What again in the schedule, as we mentioned, that will start on next Wednesday. There won't be any separate webinar for it, because this webinar itself will guide you about how to go about design iteration 1. So we'll be iterating our design in at least 3 iterations. And why is that? Because every design you need to define identify certain proof of concepts, and then you need to work on those proof of concepts. And basically, if those proof of concepts are not successful, or you find some different ideas while doing proof of concepts, you can modify the design. So that's how you will, iterate in each multiple iterations the design basically, and eventually you'll come up with your final solution document. So the week that would be starting next, not the tomorrow's Wednesday, but the Wednesday after that, you will focus on design iteration 1, where by then assuming that all your requirements are completed, then basically, and reviewed by your mentor, and then they are fine, they give you go ahead for requirements, then you freeze those requirements, and then you start designing the system. What you do in the design iteration 1 is you first only identify blocks which are subsystems of your system basically. You can say componentize your system, divide your system, break down your system into multiple blocks or subsystems. And then what you do is define interfaces for each block. So each block is a black box for you. You don't know what is inside. You don't have to worry about what is going to be inside. All you need to care is that what kind of inputs this block can accept, and what output, in what format does it give the output. So that you need to just consider, and then you identify different proof of concepts for each block. Each block to talk to each other. If you find that basically one of the blocks is Google Maps, or one of the block is payment gateway. So first you need to identify what are going to be the inputs and outputs. Sudhir, can we just try to see if people cannot sketch on the screen? This is disturbing a bit.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll just check.
And then, and basically, if whoever is doing that, can we just remove that user basically from this webinar? So that would help. And defining the interfaces for each subsystem and the block. And then we also identify the POCs, proof of concepts. Basically, those proof of concepts then will make sure that when they complete, they would be able to produce some of the interfaces like Google Maps or payment gateways. Assuming that basically we are interacting with them, they are able to interact and produce the output in the format that we expect, and take the input in the format that we expect. So those kind of a proof of concept we need to do. Here is the sample design iteration 1. For example, the same e-commerce application that we considered, the end user interface.
Is there any problem?
I don't know. Somehow it just.
Yeah. Now can you share the screen once again?
Yes. I did that.
Now just do that.
So the same e-commerce application that we talked about. So the end user interface, for example, is one component, one subblock, and this can be defined in the wireframes. I'll talk more about that. Another component is the search service, order service, billing service, shipping service. the nightly batch process, and 5 minutes batch process. So some of the examples, basically I could have put it in a very nice block diagram actually, but because of time I could not do that. So you can kind of put it in a nice block diagram and kind of basically put the arrows as to which component is talking to which component. So that way, just looking at the diagram, user is clear that which blocks are talking to which block, that means which interface is talking to which interface, that you will be clearly able to know. And then you can write one or two lines, or a small line about the purpose of this block basically. That way your block diagram will be even more intuitive. People will be able to read that block diagram without any explanation. For example, interface definition. Then what we do is, once we define the blocks, then what we do is for every designing it further is, I'll first break down my requirements, which are use cases in terms of page flows. So when I say there is a login page, then there is a home page, then there is a search page, then there is a catalog page, then there is a product details page, there is a cart page, there's a my cart page, and then there is a place order page, and there is a payment page, and there is a confirmation page, and things like that basically, right? So I just define those, and how each use case, when user is purchasing the item, which all pages that user is going through, just describe in the word basically. So once you describe in the word, okay, user comes to this page, then goes to this page, then goes to this page and does this, then goes to that page and does that. That way basically you are listing down all the pages. Now take all the pages that you mentioned and prepare wireframes for those pages basically. You can do it by literally pen, pencil, paper, and then take the photos, or you can use ready-made sketch tools, right? Actually there are many tools available for this. And then basically come back to your use cases and then describe the use cases by actually putting, instead of the sentences, you can put your wireframes that you just defined on the pictures. Basically put those flows basically. The use case one, this is the flow. So just looking at your pictures in sequence, I'll be able to understand how I can imagine the use case basically. So this is how you design this interface further. Similarly, search service. In the beginning, you just put what data input search service is expecting and what is the output. For example, those who know about software, JSON is the format typically used, or XML is the format typically used by many of the services basically. So you have to just write those outputs and inputs in JSON format or XML format. So that way you'll be able to basically define that clearly. Then order service, then billing service, shipping service, nightly batch process. For example, nightly batch process does not take any input. It just triggers, it picks up the data from wherever it is and then it produces output. So in this case, there won't be any input, but there will be output in certain format actually, right? So you have to define that, okay, my batch process will send emails, right, using SMTP protocol. My batch process will be save some information in the database using SQL standard structured query language, or NoSQL language, right? So you have to just define it that way actually, right? So you have to define those interfaces, right? Actually, once that is done, then we'll go to design iteration 2, which will happen. Start again the consequent Wednesday basically. We'll conduct the webinar for that, because by then we would have received a lot of inputs from you, and then we'll guide you basically, right? So what you do in design iteration 2 is you can split the team. Some of the team can implement the POCs that you identified while breaking down your system in the iteration 1, and then basically some team can still go ahead and modify the design basically, right, in the process. Because let's say you finish your POC in 3 days, in the given 2 weeks time, then you feel that, okay, this is not working, let's try something else. It is working with slight variation, which makes you to change your design. You will change the design basically, right? And then that's how you evolve your design actually. And then at the end of that design iteration, some of the POCs still may be pending actually. So basically you mark down those POC in the next iteration. You say that in the next 2 weeks, that is iteration 3, we will then implement those POCs. And in the process, whatever we learn, which we can again modify the design. So this is how you basically complete your iterations. And then at the end of it, your design would be ready. Actually, you'll be confident about it because you would have implemented all the POCs. So all that data will be available to you. And then we can come back to the solution document actually. And then we prepare the solution document with all the content that is available to us, right? In these iterations basically, right? And this is how you will write the solution document. What happened previously was we had given you directly the solution document format. While some of the team did a good justice and they created the solution document quite to quite decent level, we felt that many others are not able to do right justice to it basically. Hence we thought we will help you step by step to come to the level you can then have enough content to write the solution document basically, right? Again, whether you call it a high level design or design iteration 1, low level design or design iteration 2, that's not important, right? As long as your solution document is able to convey all the designed elements basically and answer my questions related to the scope of the problem, then then we should be fine with the solution document, right? Don't have to fill in each and every section there, or you can add more sections in addition to whatever is available there. So you don't have to restrict yourself to that, right? Once that is done, basically, again, for this phase also, we would have a separate webinar to clarify any of queries you may have, and then that would follow by the presentation. So then we will be guiding you on how to do the presentation of your solution, right? Actually, we would be giving you timelines, whether it will be 10 minutes video or 15 minutes video. Entire team should come together and present. Everybody should be able to present it together, right? Not even a single person missing who has worked actively on the solution part should be able to present some part actually, because there is a credit for teamwork also, right? And then we will guide you on how to submit these documents as well as video formats, where to submit. All those will be basically given as a guidance in that webinar. So with this, I will just pause here actually, and then I will hand it over to Atul for the further presentation. So over to you, Atul.
Yes,
so Sudhir, yeah, you'll have to unmute Atul and
Yeah.
I'll just do that. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, Atul, please.
Yes.
You can share the screen and you can start. Yeah, that's right.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Can you go to presentation? Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So, hello everyone. Thanks, Mahesh, for explaining in detail the overall approach and the reason why we have made a more stage-wise and step-wise approach. So I'm sure all our young friends have now understood the methodology of executing a R&D or a development project. So I will pick up from where Mahesh has explained about the IT project. Now, during the past few weeks interactions, many of you who have projects which are brick and mortar, I mean IT and non mechatronics contained, they had some difficulty in understanding the various document formats and the ways of some nomenclature. So here is it. I will take a small example, a very simple project for example. So let us say we have a simple problem with this COVID-19 requirement going on, a foot operated hand sanitizer with visitor counting along with the audit log. So the overall process requirement, the broad level requirement from the equipment or the system is, in a place like commercial office or a factory or a shop where visitors are entering the premises, it is essential to ensure that they are sanitizing their hands. It is also necessary to keep the count of the visitors, and of course, needless to say, it should be touch free. So with this problem statement, if you want to apply the methodology that we just discussed, Mahesh just explained, what are the requirements of this system or for the problem? So if we look at the user requirements, so who all will be the users? In a very simplistic way, there will be two kinds of actual physical users. One is a visitor who would actually be using this system for sanitization, and another maybe a monitor user who would be actually monitoring this system for its upkeep and ensuring that this system is running. So one of the requirements from visitor would be visitor should be able to get his hands sanitized by pressing a foot switch by his leg, by his foot. Then visitor should get an audio feedback once the sanitization is done. Monitor user should be able to refill the sanitizer without halting the equipment operation. I mean, this is something where while a visitor is getting sanitized, monitor should be able to refill the sanitizer. So obviously in the next stage of detailing of design, you have to think on this requirement. Then all users should be able to see the date, time, and the number of visitors at any given moment. Monitor user should be able to view the report of date-wise visitors on the display by selecting a date. Of course, as explained by Mahesh, just like physical users, there are some intrinsic users. So in this case also, there will be a system user which should raise an audio alarm, audio visual alarm, if the sanitizer is empty. Also, system user should raise an audio visual alarm in case of any other malfunction. Now, these are some examples of very straightforward user requirements. There could be some more complex user requirements. Something like a user would want to, a user of any age group should be able to use it without required to be bent too much. I mean, if you look at the various entry points, sometimes, especially in swimming pools, it is written that persons below such and such height are not allowed to enter the swimming pool. So because the systems are designed for safety for certain category of people. So for the people with lesser height, especially with the young people or young kids, they should not be required to, they should not feel too much difficulty. At the same time, people with normal height should also be able to use the system. So such complex user requirements can also come. So similarly in your projects, there could be such similar complex requirements that you need to, read between the lines. So once you have identified such user requirements, of course, there are certain functional user requirements which are not related to user. Since this is a brick and mortar system, the functional user requirements may be of size. There may be a size restriction in how much size the equipment can sit. What should be the maximum weight of the equipment? Then what should be the rate? I mean, in 1 hour, how many people should get sanitized? So similar such requirements also will be there. Once all these user requirements are identified, you will need to actually focus and then keep on thinking, what should be the system consist of? Which blocks should be there? What should be the subsystems which will make my system there? So we can think of, for this kind of problem, for these user requirements, maybe very simplistic approaches. There are following subsystems that you can think and their components. First of all, there will be a mechanical structure subsystem, which will be mechanical subsystem. What will be the function of that subsystem? Is to actually hold everything into the base of the equipment. So the components of mechanical subsystem would be a frame or a stand. Then there could be some holding arrangements or bracket to hold the sanitizing subsystem. Then there could be some holding arrangement and bracket for mounting the control system. The second subsystem that we can think is sanitizing subsystem. The real heart, you can say, like the main functionality of the equipment is sanitizing. So the sanitizing subsystem you can think of can have a sanitizer tank or bottle. Why bottles? Think again, you are supposed to do simultaneous refilling. So surely you need some arrangement where either there should be 2 bottles or 2 tanks or 2 mechanisms or 2 spraying mechanisms. So there will be spraying mechanism, there will be bottles, there will be a foot switch with sensor. Why sensor? Because obviously you need to detect that foot switch is pressed to take further actions. So that's where the interfaces comes in. Then there will be a sanitizer level detector, obviously to check if the sanitizer is finished or the sanitizer is empty. Now remember, these 2 are very important elements. Why? You will come to know next. The third subsystem would be the control system. which will be again, you can say it's a brain, which is going to control the overall equipment operation. And here you again see the foot switch with sensor and a sanitizer label with detector. Please note, these elements, they appear in the two subsystems. Why? Because this is an example of an interface element between two subsystems. See, any system which is composed of multiple subsystems, these subsystems are not always independent. They are dependent on each other and they interact with each other. So these elements are interface elements. The final design or selection of the component depends on design of more than one subsystem. This is a perfect example of where interdisciplinary design perspective is required. I mean, you can design, select a foot switch which is suitable to your mechanical system. But if your control system is unable to interface with the sensor, that foot switch has no use. Same way for the sanitizer label sensor detector. Then there will be electronic controller. Based on the user requirements, you have to see what kind of controller can be used. Can you use a PC based thing? Yes, you can do it. But if your size restriction not allowing to use PC, you might have to use a smaller controller. Can you use a microcontroller? Maybe yes. Can you use a PIC micro? Maybe yes. So there will be various options. Then you will need a display to show the various indications and alarms. Then there can be various options of display, alphanumeric display or a simple LED light and annunciations with indicators. You will also need a buzzer for audio indication and a keypad for various user interactions. So this is how, my friends, you can actually, break down the big mechatronic system into multiple subsystems and the components. Think of the interfaces between them, see the workflow required, and then start selecting the components. Try to see how they can connect and interface, talk to each other. Sometimes you will be talking programmatically when there is a software involved. Sometimes it will be through the physical interfaces, like you need to bolt the sanitizing bottle onto the bracket, and the bracket has to be fixed with a mechanical interface. So this is the way to actually go forward and start designing them. So you might be doing mechanical drawings, you might be doing electrical wiring diagrams, you might be creating flowcharts for your program, and so on. So I guess all of you must have now understood how to think and how to take next steps in trying to visualize and design for a mechatronic or brick and mortar system. With this, I hand over to the host for the further interactions. So
Atul, thank you so much.
Right. Okay.
Now we have Mahesh is also, let Mahesh also be there, because we have few questions and then we will answer these questions. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So the thing is, as many of you have requested, I'll do that. Many of you have requested that we should keep this presentation on the portal. Yes, we are going to do that. We are going to have this recording of this webinar also, and the copy of the presentation would be available for you on the portal, right? And you can refer to that. I will request, of course, now I will request all the mentors, because I'll be circulating this final presentation to all my mentors once again. So they will also forward you this presentation, and you will get it from the mentors also. That's number one. Mahesh, there was a question which is related to the submission process.
Okay.
Yeah. There are students, those who are asking for, whenever you say submission, I want, and as an academician, I want this submission of these documents should be different than the submission of a journal.
Right, right.
So
Yes.
if you can elaborate as far as the submissions are concerned,
Okay, okay,
that will
okay.
help the
Yes.
students. You and Atul can
Yeah,
pitch.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have to be scared of submission word in the industry as you may be in the academic life. Okay. So
Yes.
it's just kind of uploading your documents. That's it. That's the scope of submission basically. Okay. So it could be a document or a video. We'll be guiding you as to where to upload that. So submission is more of uploading that. That's all.
Yeah. And another thing is there is a question, very specific question, that the schedule which is there on the portal
Uh-huh.
and the schedule which we have declared today,
Right.
if you go with the spirit of both the schedules, spirit is same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the only thing is now the students will be asking, and they have asked the question that are we going to follow now this schedule?
Yes. So the reason is that we came up with this schedule looking because we thought that different students, different teams are basically not able to keep up with the pace that we had originally defined. We've broken it down into multiple phases, and then we will be doing iteration by iteration. So the first iteration of 2 weeks, where you are going to define the requirements for all kind of components of your system. Many teams have come up with multiple solutions for solving the problem. So they can put together all the requirements of all the different systems they are designing. They are thinking of designing into requirement specification document. Again, there is no specific format. A plain Word document with multiple tables, or in a plain bullet list or numbered list is fine. And then they have to share that with their mentors on the requirement, and that they have 1 week starting tomorrow. And once that is over, then they have to go into breaking down the system into different, basically components. So that's the iteration one, design iteration one. So again, if you're done with your requirements, once your mentors are fine with that, then you don't have to wait. If you are complete, you completed the requirement specification of your system by, let's say, by Friday or Saturday this week, then you can start working. Once you get a go ahead from your mentor, you can just go ahead and start working on breaking down your system into high level components or subsystems. Then you can utilize even some of this week's time also. So this way you can complete your iteration one, design, identify the POCs, and then again submit it for the reviews. And as and when you make progress, you can move on to the next activity and make further progress. So we will stick to this iteration wise schedule going forward. And maybe Sudhir, if possible, we can update the website also with this revised schedule.
Yes, Mahesh, we'll do that.
Yeah, I think
In the meantime, there are similar to these questions. I'll just maybe club all these questions which have come to me either privately or to everyone, which is related to is it a completely new beginning of the submission, or the submission for past week are also going to be counted? No work is a waste. Don't
Yes.
forget that.
Correct.
Very, very important. Whatever you have done in last 2 weeks, we must, and we have already, most of my mentors have appreciated the work which you have put in. But there are certain concerns from our side, and that's why we conducted this webinar. And the concern is basically depth of your thought process. Please keep it in mind. This is different than your normal project work. We want you to focus more on a thought process, a defined and a very, very clear thought process, so that back and forth in design is not appreciated. Normally, no industry will appreciate that you have done something, then redo certain things. That is not accepted. And that's where we have gone with this webinar. And the other thing is, very important, Mahesh and Atul, you can, I'll just read this question. How are we supposed to know if the submission we have submitted was okay, good, need to improve? Any feedback will be given to us by others or other than the mentors? What's the procedure?
No, so yes, so yeah, that's a good and important question. Yes, so that's how where the mentor will definitely guide you. You submit, you write to your email alias, team email alias, and attach that document before uploading that document. and get a feedback from your mentor, or you upload it to a temporary location and then basically give that URL to mentor. Once you get a go ahead from your mentor, you can upload the document to the given location.
Yes.
That is on the InTech Olympiad website. There is a space available where you can mention the location of the document, and you can do that, or directly upload the document there.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
Sudhir.
one more question.
Sudhir. Just
Yeah,
I have a couple of thoughts here actually.
please.
I think her question is very specific, which says any feedback will be given to us by others other than mentors. So I guess she is not asking about mentors' feedback, which she knows that she will already get, but she is interested to know that is there any way to get feedback from others, which other than the mentors.
Yeah.
So it's a, I mean, it's a, it's like ideally, yes, it would be better that as many people can give feedback, but I guess it would be slightly impractical that each of these, each project viewed by all mentors and giving feedback. Maybe at a level of design iteration 2 or something, we can, I don't know, maybe we have to think on this. To be very
Atul, let me share some internal things with my participants also.
Okay.
Because when we receive the documents, when we receive those solution documents, normally what we do is not only the mentor, because we have access to those documents, there is a core team which we keep on working on
Yes.
those documents.
Yes.
And we definitely look at those documents, either directly or indirectly. The feedback is given either to the mentor or to some other channel.
Correct.
That's what we are doing actually. And
Correct.
keep it in mind, because this was a question from Nidhi Jain. Please keep it in mind that there will be multiple things which are happening. You might know, you might not know. All right. So it will be there. You will receive feedback from us because we want a perfect solution to a problem statement. And the reason for that is there is a possibility, and that's where we all are working towards. If we solve these problems, probably that would get converted, that prototype or the proof of concept, what POC, what we are talking about, the POC would get converted into a prototype and then prototype to product. That's the journey actually. And we wish that this journey should happen on this forum. Right? Now there are questions about now do we have to work on the requirement specification document. We will go with the flow of the schedule, and the flow is quite logical. The reason I'll tell you, the reason I will repeat this, maybe could be I've said this number of times before also in this webinar even. The solutions which we have received, no doubt they are phenomenal solutions. You have put in a lot of efforts in that solution, but we are not happy with those solutions because these solutions will lack, they are lacking in depth. So you have to improve that depth. Now, how can I improve the depth? Is natural. I have to go again and get the requirements once again, check, have I missed anything? As Mahesh and Atul has rightly pointed out, so many things. And I'm sure there is a possibility after this webinar, you will rethink over your own solutions and then you will come out with the refined solution. That's what is the idea. Mahesh, you want to add something?
No, I think you covered it very well, and Atul also commented. So I think, yes, this is pretty much the expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sudhir.
Yes.
Yeah, there is one interesting question from Saurabh Gupta.
Okay.
He says, sir, the week challenge which was given on InTech portal is now changed to this challenge. Yeah. Now it's the question slightly confuses me. Since he is using the word challenge. So if he is, I don't know, like you might want to ask him exactly what he wants by, what he means by challenge. Because if it, I mean, the schedule, yes, if he means schedule, then yes, schedule is getting changed. But by challenge, if he is meaning the problem statement getting confused with the example problem statements, we want to clear his doubt. I mean,
see, the problem statements are same. And the students are going to work on the same problem statements. Absolutely, there is no change. The only thing is we want to set right the thought process. Let me repeat my statement. we want to set right the thought process which is being developed, maybe because of the environment, because of the culture, because of the exposure. We want to set right that thought process and align that thought process with the product design industrial thought process. That's the idea.
We will go inside each block separately and then figure out what do we do in that block to make sure that once it gets the input in the given format, the block does everything that is needed to produce the output in the given format. So that we'll do in the consequent iterations. And that's how we are going to design each block separately. Okay, and that's how we are going to use consequent design iterations. And then we'll do hands-on work with the POCs. Basically, we'll identify proofs of concepts and we'll work on that to prove that if I get input in a certain format, this block, then this block can do XYZ things to basically produce the output in the given format. So those are the POCs that we'll do independently. Okay. So we will be simulating. In case of the physical systems, we might be simulating these blocks actually, right? Then we will, in the simulation, we'll explain, okay, this is how it gets it, and by using these techniques, mathematical models, it makes sure that the output is produced basically, right? So this is how we will work on each block in the consequent iterations. Yes, thank you.
There is one more question, which is related to most of these participants are students. No doubt about it, because this is meant for students. All right.
Yes.
And they are learning in colleges and doing internship for the first time. We understand that. So what to do in particular week, we are unable to find. So how we are come to know what to do. Now, my plain answer to this is, please go through this webinar, even the recording also, look at the webinar once again and read that document carefully. You will find some interesting words out of that. Work on those words actually. Please keep it in mind. You have to work on those words and develop your understanding. And then mentor would come to rescue. Till that time, mentor is not going to do anything. All right? That's what is going to happen.
Yeah. Correct. Yes. After this webinar, you're right, Sudhir. After this webinar, students would be clear as to what is my focus in the current week. Your focus in the current week, that is starting tomorrow till next Tuesday, is gathering the requirements, making sure that you get your requirements listed down and get those from your mentors. And then after that, basically start working on design iteration, break down those, look at the requirements and break down your system into multiple blocks, high level blocks, logical splitting of the system, and then work on that in the consequent week. This is a very, very focused agenda for every week. Then what to do after that week, we will conduct a separate webinar for that. So don't worry about what happens in design iteration 2, design iteration 3. We will come to that separately. And we could do those webinars project specific also, because each project is different. So we will guide you separately as to what exactly you are needed to do in the consequent week, so that you get very project specific guidance for the consequent weeks. So we'll do that separately. So focus on requirement specification, gathering, planning requirements, gathering requirements in the current week, and the next week you start breaking down the system in multiple components. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I'll repeat this. There will be an elimination. It is not that we will keep on working with those who are not either interested or those who are not contributing. We don't want, we really, frankly speaking, most of my mentors have a lot of other work and they are putting a lot of their efforts, and the time which they are putting in, that is not the time which is actually for InTech Olympiad, but out of their interest and the interest of the students, all my mentors are putting in a lot of efforts. So when they are putting efforts, we don't want to carry a burden of non-performance. I'm repeating this. We are not going to carry the burden of non-performance. Slowly, those non-performance will vanish. There is a process for that. Believe us, there is a process for eliminating those who are non-performance. Mahesh.
Yes, you're right, Sudhir. Yeah. We will be, very particular about, student being active. They're not able to produce is one thing, but If they're not asking specific questions, they're not doing research. We will come to know based on their quality of questions itself whether they are reading or not. Right? For example, someone asks, send the guideline documents like earlier stages. There's no format, right? This is the whole idea, right? There is no specific format. You basically just list down your requirements in plain text, and that is fine for current submission. And for the block diagram also, you just create a diagram basically. There's no documents in a specific format. So don't worry, get worried about a particular format as such. Come up with the requirements and guideline document. But those who are not doing it seriously, once we understand that they're not actively working on the projects, we may not kind of include them in the consequent phases. So we may eliminate them.
So that's a question. In fact, I don't know, Keval, I'll just read question for my two colleagues. Sir, we are working on 3 solutions currently. Should we switch to one and prepare only requirement specification to improve efficiency, or should we go for 3? Mahesh.
See, basically share all the 3 solutions with your mentor, and then basically understand as to which solution. See, there is many times there could be confusion. If to solve the given problem statement, you may have to implement different subsystems, right? Actually, then basically there is a subsystem. For example, sanitization, or making sure that the residential apartments are safe. The risk of the COVID is minimized if that kind of a problem is there, and you're defining different subsystems. One for visitor entry automation, other for elevator automation, third for every floor apartment or a flat basically safety. Then these are different subsystems basically, right? It's a part of a same solution. So as long as you have the solution concept is clear in your mind, then you only work on one solution, right? It could comprise of multiple subsystems, but one solution is good enough. So you can discuss with your mentor, identify one solution, right? And it could contain multiple subsystems, but have one solution and then focus on that solution. That would be great.
Yeah, I think.
Sudhir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I just want to share some of my experiences with some of the participants.
Yes, please.
I will not give names, but it is related to your earlier question or earlier point that you were making about the elimination. And I could see that some of the participants are already, spreading their bandwidth across multiple activities. Right now, the colleges are not on. Everybody is, students are trying to get as much effective use of their time as possible, and in the process, possibly spreading themselves too thin. There was one candidate from one of my teams whom I had not seen in any of my earlier communication, but after my multiple emails, she approached saying that she is doing a full-time online internship with another company. In spite of that, she has been spending handsome amount of time, more than 2 to 3 hours per day for past 2 weeks on our project, but she had missed the webinars. Now here actually I have a very, very frank thought to share with all my young friends. If you want to do something and get something meaningful out of it, you have to give sufficient amount of time consistently. That consistency also is very important. So you have to actually, think exactly which of the various activities that you are doing apart from InTech Olympiad. I mean, I'm not here to say you should only do this or that, but I mean, even if you want to do, physically it may be not possible. So this is again, of course, maybe a different perspective, but I thought of sharing it with my young friends, because if they try too hard but are not able to give justice and feel guilty, it should not have a bad effect on them also. I mean, it's a completely different perspective. So
yeah, Atul, that's absolutely right. That's good. Yeah. See, as far as the delay in submissions are concerned, see, we have to stick to the deadlines, and that's one of the learning. So why to think of delay right in the beginning? So let's not do that. But at the same time, if you have put in efforts and because of some genuine reason there is a delay, please talk to your mentor. He is there, he or she is there to help you out. And of course, submission, all those things, that's the reason I said, let's have a different protocol for this submission than the journal submission. Please do that actually. Yes, Mahesh, I think we have answered most of the queries and the questions raised by the participants.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, I think, yeah. So
I see one question, maybe.
Yeah, the last question.
And or one more student, maybe it can be taken offline, I don't know. He
Yeah.
says, Vedant Chavan, he says, I'm a diploma student and this is not so related to me, but I'm learning much. Should I continue? I think if you have time and are able to manage, I guess he should continue. I mean, Sudhir, you can speak on this.
No, I said to him that he should continue because there's a lot of learning happening.
Yes.
And it is irrespective of whether you are a diploma student or a degree student or MBA student or civil or mechanical. Learning is important.
Yes.
And this learning is about a thought process, not technology. Please, in first few days, you will find that yes, your refinement in thought process. Let's do that. And let's take the last question, I think. We are going forward with the solution. It is quite clear that we have to reduce the cost during implementation. But our team doesn't have an idea on the cost involved in using database and other technologies. How can we avoid incurring a lot of cost, Mahesh? Can you reduce the cost?
Correct. Yes. So basically, if you are designing a system that needs a database to store information, it needs the database to store information, no doubt. I mean, you can reduce the cost only to the extent that so that something is feasible, right? Actually, so you start basically first you start with the design, right? And then we will optimize it for the cost in consequent iterations, basically, right? So for now, you define the requirements and come up with the high-level block diagram, which says there is a database in our system, basically, okay, which is one of the blocks. Now, which database should it be? Whether it should be a open source database which comes free, which can be hosted on Linux in your own data center. So everything is free, right? Then you have pretty much reduced the cost, right? Like open source databases like MySQL, MongoDB, right? Cassandra. So a lot of these databases are open source, so there is zero cost to it, right? So you can always, basically work hand in hand with your mentors and come up with a solution which is optimal for the cost, right? So costing and all, don't worry about it. It will come in the consequent iterations. First, if you need a database, you need a database, right? If basically, if you need a mobile phone for a communication, then you need a mobile phone. Then which mobile phone should that be? Should it be only 2G enabled mobile phone, 3G enabled, 4G, 5G enabled mobile phone? That we can implement based on the cost factor, basically. If you want to, cost is the important parameter of the solution and this requirement, then we will see to it that if we need only 2G kind of a protocol, we will only consider 2G device for the implementation. So those will come in consequent iterations. First, let's come up with a block diagram and say what all things are mandatory. And then we'll in consequent iterations look at how to basically reduce the cost of each component. We can do it in the later iterations.
Yes. So thank you so much. Most of the questions which we have answered, but if still there are some doubts, please be in touch with your mentor and we will continue working with you. I wish you all the best and I thank my colleagues Mahesh and Atul and all the mentors, also those who joined this webinar and put in a lot of their efforts. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, students. Bye.